bring in Mike Pompeo, of course, the former Secretary of State and a Fox News contributor. Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's start with Ukraine. Steve Witkoff, who's been the envoy for the president, both for the Mideast and Ukraine. I mean, he's been a busy guy, essentially an ad hoc Secretary of State, if you will. But he's getting blamed now for not directly blaming Russia for the Ukraine invasion. Now, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, obviously Russia's to blame for invading Ukraine. I can say it. You can say it. But the man in the middle of the negotiations, he's trying to negotiate an almost impossible peace deal. But they seem to care more about virtue signaling than they do about stopping a conflict that's caused 1 million casualties.
Yeah, David, look, I think that's largely right. Moral clarity does matter, so we have to speak to that. But when you're in the middle of a very complex, multifaceted, you can see the Europeans, by the way, the Europeans are in different places, not just one view in Europe. The Ukrainians, the Russians, the American interests. That's a complex system, and the best things are done quietly. Those negotiations take place in private amongst the parties where you exchange ideas about what's possible. How do you actually get the shared vision of bringing more peace, more prosperity, ensuring that Ukrainian sovereignty is protected is something that I'm less concerned about what people say out loud, and more importantly, that they're working towards achieving that objective, which is deeply in America's interest.
And there's another objective, of course, which goes beyond Ukraine and Russia's interest, and that's the interest of the American taxpayer and making sure that if we don't get it, I mean, obviously we're not going to get all of the money back that we paid. They paid with their lives dearly for the Russian invasion. But taxpayers deserve some kind of assurance that it's not just going to be a black hole in which all of our money goes while people are getting killed by the hundreds of thousands in Ukraine. What about this mineral deal? Is that a way of getting some of our money back?
Yeah, I think more than that. I think it's even better than that for Ukraine and for the United States of America. I think having American companies invest their private money to rebuild some piece of the Ukrainian economy and the United States companies, shareholders, to benefit from that is an enormously good outcome for Ukraine. We talk about security. One of the best ways to ensure that is to ensure that they have a robust, thriving economy in the aftermath of this war so that they can do the things they need to do to rebuild their own nation and protect themselves in the years ahead.
Which leads us directly to the Middle East and to the president's very unique way of thinking about how to deal with Gaza, like getting his developer instincts in motion and thinking that maybe we need to resettle people until we can fix up Gaza, turn it into a paradise on the Mediterranean, and then get the Gazans back in. What do you make of that?
Look, I'm only laughing. We need to stretch the imagination of the possible. And I think that's what President Trump did when he talked about this. He was saying, look, we have to have a solution that has to be different than the way this has rolled for an awfully long time. If we can figure out a way to underwrite the reconstruction of this place, and we can figure a way to completely eliminate the terror threat for the Israelis, and so that Americans don't have to risk their lives there again 5, 10, 15 years from now. If we can get that right, not just in Gaza, but in southern Lebanon, in western Syria, if we can get the security situation right, and begin to rebuild, perhaps there'll be a brighter, more prosperous day for the people that live in Gaza.
Now, I have talked to Arabs who are very suspicious of this idea, who think of ethnic cleansing and ideas that are so hard in the past, and think if the Gazans are moved out, they'll never be able to move back in again. What kind of assurance could there be to our Arab partners like Saudi Arabia that won't happen?
Look, I think the Gulf Arab states are going to have to lead this effort. They need to come up with a solution, whether that solution involves taking them outside of Gaza and bringing them back, or just moving them inside of Gaza and doing the rebuilding from north to south or from south to north. It's now turn to say, here's how this is going to be paid for, and here's how we're going to deliver that in a way that is fundamentally decent, that is, it gets to the right outcome, but doesn't repeat past history. That's the tragedy we've all suffered for 40-odd years now.
The key is, as you said, getting the Arabs directly involved, maybe with the Palestinian Authority out of the middle ground. Of course, something John Kerry said could never be done, but it was done
the
through
three
the
no's,
Abraham
yes,
Accords.
Exactly.
And extending the Abraham Accords would be vital with two goals. One, that Hamas never get back in control of Gaza, and two, that Iran, which is behind so much of the mischief, whether it's in Lebanon or in Gaza, funding Hamas and Hezbollah, making sure that they don't get a nuclear weapon. Those two goals are unnegotiable, correct?
Unnegotiable, totally achievable, and we should draw back to what we were just saying in Ukraine. Don't forget the Iranians and the Russians have a deep set of ties. The Iranians providing weapon systems. To the extent we get a good outcome in Ukraine, right, not the failed outcome that we had in Afghanistan when President Biden allowed that calamity to take place, to the extent we get a good, solid outcome there, we increase the probability that we can get a really good outcome for the Gulf, the Israelis, and for the United States and the Middle East.
I wasn't planning to ask you about Afghanistan, but my son served there as a Marine, and so many other people who have family that served there were so upset at the way the withdrawal happened. Having set up a plan for withdrawal, which you did in the first Trump term, what did you think of when you saw that catastrophic withdrawal?
Absolutely heartbreaking, unnecessary, didn't have to happen. Those were my first thoughts. But to your son and to those who served there, they did amazing work. As a CI director, I saw the enormous number of American lives they saved by taking down terror plots from that place. So bless them. I want to thank them for the work that they did. I get how disheartening it was to watch that fall that way, but know that their work was noble and decent and important. We could have gotten it right. President Trump was on the trajectory to get it right. And then, President Biden came in and just pulled the pin.
I'm also hearkening back to your days as Secretary of State. Did you see, thinking about Panama and the recent charges that the president and others have leveled against China's influence there, did you see the beginning of that influence when you were Secretary of State?
Undoubtedly. No, the Chinese Communist Party is running too fast and free in that place. The risk that Panama is not going to handle that in a way that is consistent with their treaty obligations was real. I'm glad that President Trump and Secretary Rubio are taking that on.
They're not exaggerating the Chinese influence there?
Not one bit. The risk is very real.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
For being here, Mike Pompeo. Appreciate it.